Look at this house, a cul-de-sac outside Moffett, Colorado. Population under 200, mountains on every side, the kind of address you would need a map to find twice. On the night of April 28, 2021, Corporal Stephen Hansen of the Saguache County Sheriff's Office was sent here to investigate a reported death. That is all the call said, a death. Nothing about what waited inside. A death report in a place like this usually means one of two things: an elderly resident found by a neighbor, or an overdose, quiet and solitary, the kind rural counties see more of than they would like. Hansen had likely handled both before: routine, procedural, sad in an ordinary way. He executed a search warrant that night expecting exactly that kind of sadness. He did not get it. Inside one of the bedrooms, on the bed itself, was a body wrapped in a sleeping bag. Around the sleeping bag, strung deliberately, were Christmas lights. Around the eyes of the corpse, glitter makeup had been applied, carefully enough that it had not smudged. The remains were mummified, skin gone gray and drawn tight, tissue reduced to something closer to leather than flesh. Hansen would later tell local media he had never seen a group of people behave with so little concern around a dead body.
I've never seen a group of people be so nonchalant about a dead person in their back room.
Not shock, not grief, nonchalance. That single word is where this case actually begins. Not with a killing, because as far as investigators could determine, there was not one. This is not a murder story. This is a story about what 7 adults did after a woman was already dead, and how long it takes for reverence to become a crime, because the people around her did not appear to treat her body like a body. They treated it like something waiting to transform. A death scene usually depends on one basic assumption. When someone dies, the body is reported, preserved, and surrendered to the authorities. What Hansen found broke that assumption at every point. The body had not been left. It had been dressed. It had been positioned. It had been kept deliberately in a room that someone still slept near, for what the coroner would eventually estimate was more than a month. The house belonged to a man named Miguel Lamboy, a suspected member of a group called Love Has Won. According to the arrest affidavits, Lamboy had taken in a group of people who needed somewhere to stay. He told investigators he returned home from a trip to Denver that Wednesday and found the body in a back bedroom himself. He called it in. He told police he believed the group had transported the remains from California and that the SUV parked on the property had its back seat folded down in a way consistent with moving a body that size.
So yesterday I was out all day. I went to Mount Rose and went to Wheat Ridge. And then I came back late at night and found a group of people from California, Oregon, West Coast, who just dropped by.
He described the corpse to police in blunt physical terms: gray skin, missing eyes, teeth exposed through lips pulled thin by decomposition. The coroner could not immediately confirm who this was. Fingerprints were not an option. The tissue had decomposed too far to recover a usable print. Investigators would need dental records instead. Based on decomposition alone, the coroner estimated she had likely been dead since March, which meant the body had been kept, dressed, decorated, and transported for weeks before anyone outside the group called the authorities. The woman is believed to have been Amy Carlson, 45 years old, known to her followers as Mother God. There was even confusion over the name. One person at the house reportedly referred to the woman as Leah Carlson rather than Amy, a discrepancy noted in the paperwork but never central to the case. Here is where the rewind happens, because to understand why 7 people wrapped a body in a sleeping bag and strung it with lights instead of calling 911, you have to understand what they believed they were looking at. Amy Carlson grew up in Dallas. Her sister, Chelsea Renninger, has described their childhood as a good one, with parents who loved them. Carlson was a straight A student. She sang in choir. Nothing in her early life suggested the trajectory that followed. In her early adulthood, she began talking to strangers online. And somewhere in those conversations, a different version of her started to take shape. A follower drew her into a movement that would eventually become Love Has Won, and by 2018, the group had planted itself in southern Colorado. She left her 3 children behind to pursue it, including a son who was 2 years old at the time. Her followers came to know her as Mother God. According to the doctrine repeated around her daily live streams, Amy Carlson claimed hundreds of past lives, including one as Jesus Christ.
I have reincarnated reincarnated many, many moments. I was Marilyn Monroe, Joan of Arc, Jesus. Humanity's gonna trip about that because they always thought Jesus was a masculine.
She claimed she could cure cancer. She claimed she communicated with the spirit of actor Robin Williams. None of that is presented here as fact. It is presented as belief, because belief is the entire engine of what happened in that bedroom. Those claims mattered because they changed what death meant inside the group. If Amy was Mother God, then her physical decline was not necessarily treated as medical collapse. To followers, it could be interpreted as ascension. And if death was not really death, then the body in that room may not have seemed to them like a corpse at all. Love Has Won did not operate underground. It streamed. Followers appeared on camera daily, soliciting donations, selling new age healing products, attending to Carlson in what looked on the surface like a devoted and almost domestic arrangement. Her family tried to intervene. In 2020, Dr. Phil brought Carlson onto his show at her family's request and confronted her about allegations surrounding the group. Former members alleged abuse and exploitation. Followers denied those claims, but nothing changed. Love Has Won continued broadcasting, collecting followers, and reinforcing the belief system that placed Amy at the center of everything. Her family had tried other approaches before that television intervention and after it. Her sister described the intervention itself as one attempt among several that produced nothing. This is the group of people the body eventually returned to, not strangers, not a fringe operation that had just formed, a structure that had been broadcasting its beliefs publicly for years, that had already weathered accusations of abuse and financial exploitation, and that had already been the subject of a televised intervention that changed nothing. So by the time Amy Carlson died, from what the coroner would later attribute to a combination of chronic alcohol abuse, anorexia, and long-term ingestion of colloidal silver, she had spent years being told and telling others that she was not merely a woman. She was Mother God. Ascension was doctrine. Death, in the language of the group, was not framed as an ordinary ending. The hardest part of the case is that Amy Carlson does not appear to have vanished in a single violent moment. Her decline was visible. Former members and later reporting described a woman whose body was failing, while followers interpreted that failure through the language of spiritual transformation. In a normal household, that kind of decline should trigger doctors, family, or emergency services. Inside this belief system, it appears to have become part of the doctrine. That is the fact the case keeps circling back to. The public record does not point to homicide. What investigators found evidence of was what happened to Amy Carlson afterward. 2 children were inside the house when the body was discovered, a 13-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. All 7 adults present were charged with abuse of a corpse. All 7 also faced misdemeanor child abuse charges tied to the children's presence in the home. A prosecutor later said he intended to pursue more severe body tampering charges. Eventually, the district attorney dropped all charges in the case entirely, a decision that left the central question legally unresolved, even though the physical condition of the body was not seriously in dispute. That is where the legal question begins. If a person dies from illness or physical decline, that is not automatically a crime. But once the people around her keep the body, decorate it, transport it, and allow children to remain in the home with it, the question changes. It is no longer only how she died. It is what the living chose to do after death. There is a version of this case that would be simpler to tell, and it is worth naming only to set it aside. If Amy Carlson had been killed, the evidence ladder would run toward a suspect, a motive, a weapon, a struggle. None of that appears in the public record. No fatal injury has been described. No struggle has been alleged. The coroner's eventual findings point toward a body that failed slowly, worn down by alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion, a substance some of her followers regarded as sacred medicine rather than poison. That is a harder story to sell as a thumbnail, and it is also the more accurate one. The alleged crime was not what ended her life. It was what the living chose to do once it had already ended. What we know, Amy Carlson died around March 2021. The coroner's findings pointed to alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion, not violence. Her body was then kept for weeks, transported from California to Colorado, and arranged in a back bedroom with a sleeping bag, Christmas lights, and glitter around the eyes. What was reported? Corporal Hansen described the arrangement as resembling a shrine. Miguel Lamboy told police he believed the group intended to keep her in some form, rather than surrender her to authorities. Family members have said they believe Carlson's followers may have genuinely understood her death as something other than final, an ascension rather than an ending, consistent with the doctrine the group preached in its own broadcasts for years. What remains unexplained, at least in any way a courtroom ever settled, whether the group's actions constituted a crime born of concealment or a devotional act performed by people who sincerely did not believe they were looking at a corpse, whether the eventual dismissal of all charges reflected a lack of criminal intent, a legal technicality, or simply the difficulty of prosecuting belief itself, and what exactly 7 adults were waiting for in that back bedroom for weeks before anyone knocked on a door and told the truth. Carlson's family has never pretended the story is simple. Her sister has said publicly that she believes her sister was not entirely innocent in choosing the path that led here, but that no human being deserves what was ultimately done to her body. Her son, now an adult, has described a normal life interrupted only by the fact that his mother left to follow what the rest of the world calls a cult. Her mother has called the story a warning, one she hopes will stop another family from watching the same thing happen. None of them were in that bedroom. Only 7 people were, and one of them, the man who called it in, described what he saw in the same flat, procedural language police use for any death report: gray skin, missing eyes, a sleeping bag, Christmas lights. The charge was abuse of a corpse. The final legal record did not convict anyone of it, but the physical question remains: what did the people in that house believe they were guarding? That is why the Christmas lights stay in the mind. Not because they suggest violence, because they suggest care directed at a body everyone else would have called evidence. Whether that care was ever going to end in a phone call, or whether it was meant to continue indefinitely, is the question the dismissed charges never forced anyone to answer in court.